we're going to transition to a very special honor that we want to give also another member of our wider Mittal, Harvard, and I should say the human community. So I'll hand it over to Vikram to lead us through that. And then following that, we will hear from Dr. Swaminathan, who has come all the way from Chennai, and we're very much looking forward to that.
So we're here to really celebrate Richard Cash, a great friend of the Mittal Institute, a great friend of many of us here in this room. The original plan had been that Richard would be with us in person for this felicitation. But unfortunately, as some of you know, Richard is not keeping well. So just to say that Richard and Stella, his wife, are actually connected on Zoom for this 15-minute event. So Richard, by way of biography, for those of you who don't know Richard Cash, I think most people in this room do, but still, for those who don't, a few biographical notes would be important so that you understand why we're felicitating him today. So Richard is a senior lecturer in global health in the Department of Global Health and Population at the Harvard Chan School of Public Health. He was born and raised in the US, and he joined the Cholera Research Laboratory in what was then called East Pakistan and is now Bangladesh more than 40 years ago. There, together with colleagues, in the midst of a very significant cholera epidemic, he developed and conducted the first clinical trial of oral rehydration therapy. ORT were really built on a generation of ancestral knowledge in South Asia on rehydration, but formalized that ancestral knowledge by defining the exact composition of a mixture of sugar, salt, and water that effectively became the most important intervention that could be scaled up in rural communities around the world for the treatment not just of cholera, but indeed of any condition that was associated with dehydration. Until ORT came along, it's important to remember that the only option that was available that medical care could offer was intravenous therapy, intravenous rehydration, that is, which of course was completely impractical for the vast majority of children, not just in Bangladesh, but across South Asia in those days. It is estimated that this discovery has saved over 50 million lives worldwide. This is truly a remarkable number, probably making Richard, along with his colleagues who discovered ORT, as amongst the most important, impactful figures in medicine and public health in all history. And for this discovery, he received the 2006 Prince Mahidol Award, along with his two colleagues, and the 2011 James F. and Sarah T. Fries Foundation Prize for Improving Health. I want to quote from Marcia Castro. Marcia is the chair of the Department of Global Health and Population, where Richard holds his appointment. Nalin, Cash, and Malanabis, who are the three investigators who developed ORT, were central actors in the discovery of ORT, and their work saved and continues to save millions of lives worldwide. The development of ORT was a major milestone in public health, one that has changed the history of the mortality burden of dehydrating diarrheal diseases. The history of the path to discovery is a superb example of field-based work, detailed observation, dedication, persistence, and community engagement. The development of ORT is an example of how solutions to major public health challenges must be sought and scaled up. And I might add, they must be sought through simple solutions that every community can implement. An example that stands to this day, and this is an inspiration for overcoming ongoing and emerging health burdens. I want to directly quote Richard now. Richard, in an interview after he received this award, the Prince Mahidol Prize, he was interviewed in an article that was entitled Science Heroes, which is, of course, a very good depiction of Richard. He says, "You can't sit here in the US, do your research, and expect your ideas to work 1,000 miles away." Cash believed that without seeing the situation on the ground up close, medicine is doomed to fail for the lack of understanding of local challenges, to implementing effective interventions. This is why, and I'm quoting the journalist who wrote this piece, he teamed up with the Bangladesh Rural Advancement Committee, BRAC, one of the world's largest NGOs, if not the largest, to teach village women how to measure up the 500 milliliters of water that they needed in order to make the right combination that went into a dose of ORT. How did he do that? Well, he sat with the women who brought their own pots. He poured 500 milliliters of water into those pots and then marked the line in those pots along with those women that actually reflected 500 milliliters, so that the women could now take that pot back home and use that pot in perpetuity to measure up the 500 milliliters that they needed to add a pinch of salt and a bit of sugar every time their child had a diarrheal episode. Richard, of course, has connections with South Asia that are very deep and extensive. Many of you present here have worked with Richard, and I know many of you have very fond memories of Richard, which, if time permits, maybe we'll have a chance to share. But amongst his various engagements in South Asia, he has been a visiting professor for a couple of years at least, where he was based in New Delhi at the Public Health Foundation of India. This is in addition to his many years of working, of course, in Bangladesh. He's also had visiting faculty appointments at the James Grant School of Public Health at BRAC University in Dhaka and at the Achyuta Menon Center for Health Sciences Studies in Trivandrum in Kerala, as well as in the Graduate School of International Health Development in Nagasaki. Now, when we were thinking about this, of course, as I mentioned, we were hoping Richard would be with us. But because Richard is unable to join us, what we thought we would do is invite some testimonies from some of his long-standing collaborators in South Asia. And I'm delighted we wrote to 4 people just on Monday evening when we realized that Richard couldn't be with us. And all 4 have sent videos, which we're about to now we spool together and we'll show you. And you can also see these beautiful photos of Richard.
Thank you, Professor Patel, for inviting me to speak briefly on the ways in which Richard Cash has contributed, particularly in the field of public health, to South Asia. Richard's first great contribution, not just to South Asia, but to the world, was the work for which he received the Prince Mahidol Prize. As the citation notes, as a young clinician in Bangladesh, Richard was involved in the first scientifically proven successful clinical trial of testing oral rehydration therapy on severe diarrhea patients. The trial has become a landmark, and oral rehydration therapy has saved millions of lives around the world. Indeed, which parent, especially in countries where severe diarrheas are commonplace, has not benefited time and again from the science behind ORT? Further, in the 1970s, Richard and other scholars and activists, notably Lincoln and Marty Chen, were ardent advocates for the young nation of Bangladesh in the United States. Richard has been a teacher in South Asia for decades, teaching regular courses at BRAC in Bangladesh, St. John's in Bengaluru, the Achyuta Menon Center here in Thiruvananthapuram and elsewhere, teaching mainly public health and medical ethics courses. And for countless students from and working on South Asia in Cambridge, he's been a teacher, advisor, and friend. In terms of health and public policy, Richard's contribution has been his relentless emphasis on the social determinants of health. Close to home for me, Richard has emphasized that public action, that is land reform and changes in class, caste, and gender relations, and planned investments in the people, were preconditions for Kerala's health achievements. Public action then, and not the market, not neoliberal economic policy. Richard reiterated this conviction when he wrote and spoke of how different countries and regions, including Kerala, responded to the pandemic. Finally, how can I leave this subject without speaking of Richard's great contribution to my life over 35 years, a period over which we've continuously been in touch. He has given me and my family the gifts of friendship, discussion, and good cheer, and a big supply of crime thrillers besides. Thank you, Richard. Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Sabina Faiz Rashid. I'm at BRAC James C. Grant School of Public Health at BRAC University and a professor here. I met Richard in 1993, towards the end of 1993. And I feel extremely blessed that I've known him since then. He's an amazing person, as you all know. He was not only a mentor to me, but also a good friend. He's a few years older than me, but I mean, where do I begin with Richard? He's contributed so much to public health, to Bangladesh, to evidence, to promoting Bangladesh, but also facilitating so many connections and relationships. Richard is a very humble person, a very curious person, and he always gently teaches a person his knowledge, but also wants to learn more from whoever he interacts with. I've had the pleasure of spending time with Richard to discuss so many concepts in anthropology and culture and health and development. Richard has been he's sort of an institution at the JPG School of Public Health. He's one of the founding members. It was set up in 2004. He's contributed his time over the years for free to teach in our epidemiology of infectious diseases courses. He has guided us. He's got hundreds of students and colleagues that are indebted to him. We used to call him Santa Claus because he'd always show up with goodies in the classroom and for all of us. Most of all, I would say Richard is a unique human being. He's so unassuming, self-effacing, a brilliant man who got an award for ORS, but yet none of that ever changed him. Richard is always Richard. I feel extremely honored and blessed to know someone like Richard, and I hope that we can continue to work together. I'm also grateful to Stella, who's a wonderful other half of Richard. I mean, they make a wonderful couple. And I wish Richard all the best. I'm sending lots of love and hugs to Richard and Stella.
There are many, many examples where Richard has always been the voice of reason because he deeply understood the context of not only South Asia, but in other developing countries as well. Which gave him such a grounded view, which he took to the rest of the world where big policy decisions happen. And for that, and on behalf of many millions of children who would not be able to be saved in absence of ORT, Richard, I thank you. And I thank you on behalf of all the BRAC staff who has been benefited by your wisdom, counsel, and expertise over the years, over the lifetime, since the very, very beginning of the birth of BRAC. Thanks, Richard, and get well soon.
Richard Cash may be an American citizen by his passport, but he's truly a distinguished citizen of South Asia. In fact, he has soaked in the soul and spirit of South Asia to be not just a goodwill ambassador, but very much a proud citizen of this subcontinent. Let me now say to Richard directly, if you're listening in, Richard, then I would like to convey our very best wishes on behalf of the PHFI family, which loves you dearly and which you are very fond of. You have been a beloved teacher, a respected mentor to faculty and researchers, and of course, a friend, philosopher, and guide to me. We owe you so much in terms of not only our respect, but also love. And we hope that this will cheer you up if you're listening to us. But certainly, we hope to see you back in good health, back in India, so that we can warmly embrace you and greet you in person rather than just through this video. See you soon.
So good afternoon. I cannot top all those eminences that have profound words. So I thought I'll share a couple of personal observations about Richard, of whom I'm extremely fond. and Stella as well, his better half. I was trying to remember when I first met Richard. I think it was about maybe 15 years ago or something like that. And Sachit, is Sachit here? No. Sachit and I were teaching a Gen Ed class. It's called Gen Ed in the Harvard core curriculum. And it's usually quite a full class. Rahul's taught it with me. Doris has taught it with me. A bunch of other people. And it's, it has 150-ish students. It's an auditorium. It's one of these rooms that is designated as untouchable and unchangeable by Cambridge roster of something. And therefore the seats are made to accommodate smaller girths than the average American girth today. But sitting in these tight squeezed chair was this elderly gentleman with a big thick beard looking like Santa Claus. I said, who's this guy? I didn't know who he was, but he was there, and he would comment to me later on that, that project's never going to work on so-and-so. It's usually when Rahul or I would come up with some crazy scheme, and then Richard would say, it's not going to work. Let me tell you why it's not going to work. And upon reflection, I realized that this is a very wise man, extremely wise man. He's not being, he's not making wisecracks. He has some deep, profound wisdom. So I got to know him later on. And another incident that I remember, but very humble. I mean, there was no reason why he would be sitting in a class full of undergraduates and a few graduate students in Harvard Yard. But he saw that, presumably learned of the class, saw the title, that it was about developing countries, that is intrinsically curious, as somebody said, and came to participate. And we welcomed it. It was a real asset to the class for many years, on and off. The other time I met him, my daughter's sitting here, but she and I went to Bangladesh when she must have been, 10 years ago or something like that, very tiny. And again, there was this man sitting there. I can't remember whether this preceded the Gen Ed incident or after, but there was this man sitting there in a plastic chair, and it was Richard. He was at BRAC, because we were sitting at BRAC. I consider Abid Bhai, the founder of BRAC, to have been a mentor to me for 20 odd years. And you saw Asif, who is the current, Asif Saleh, who is the current executive director. So in a sense, that's a remote family for me in that part of the world, in some ways, helping me think through my own work and so on. But Richard was there, again, ever curious, ever gentle, ever kind. So those are my personal testimonials. And then, of course, seeing him, in social gatherings with Vikram and Sachit and everybody else, just ever gentle. So that's what I want to leave you with, just gentle and kind and ever curious, a role model to me anyway, and to all of us. So get well soon, Richard, and hope to see Stella and you soon at some, at least a social event, if nothing else. But thank you so much. Sama?
Yes, thank you. So much has been said already, and I think the words gentle and kind have been repeated many times. I think Richard's been a great friend, philosopher, guide, I think, for many of us. And one of his passions, of course, was around the ethics and the ethics of doing public health research. And he co-edited a book that the WHO brought out about 15 years ago on case studies from the developing world on the ethics of doing public health research. And each of those case studies really identifies a problem and how do you balance, the benefits and the risks to a community. And till today, I think it's widely used as a book that teaches medical ethics. So I think Richard's just an extraordinary person. And like someone else said also, that he's very, very gentle, but he was so, integrity to science and, was so close to his heart that he wouldn't hesitate to challenge you and to make you rethink. And I remember several times, met him as when I was in the ICMR, but also most recently when I was at the WHO, when he came to see me, and he had a lot of friends in WHO, a lot of people he worked with, but particularly to tell me what we were doing wrong, what he thought we were doing wrong. And of course, he was right, So, yes, I also want to wish him very well. I hope he makes a fast recovery and that he can be back with us all very soon.
As it may have been alluded to earlier as well, Stella, Richard's wife, is on the call and listening in. So Richard also, we hope, is listening in. And unfortunately, while he can't be with us, it only seems fair to give Richard the last word at his own dedication and felicitation. So we do actually have a small clip that Richard was gracious enough to send in. So we'll just get that queued up and then we'll let him have the final say.
Thank you. I very much appreciate your kind words of today's presentation. Thank you again.